Seattle, the Emerald City. To most people, the land of a space needle, ferries that drift across an open sound, and where rain has the tendency of falling for days upon days, as if somebody upstairs forgot to turn off their garden hose. But to those who know it best, the espresso melting pot of the world. A place where cafes can be found on every corner of every street, where espresso carts sit in front of bookstores, hardware stores, and banks, and the only place in civilization where you can actually find a drive-through espresso. And, well, you get the point. There's over 2 million people in the Seattle area, and maybe 2 of them don't drink espresso. I, unfortunately, don't happen to be one of those 2. I don't think anyone really imagines themselves ending up like this. Sitting here at 1 in the morning, drinking another quadruple espresso, just to keep your heart beating. Watching people carry on entire group conversations by themselves. But it happens. Of course, everyone has their own story. Own reason for ending up here. Take Lucky Lou, for example, the king of the espresso junkies. He started out by innocently chewing on coffee beans as a child. He now eats bowl after bowl of nothing but ground espresso. There's some that say he hasn't slept a wink since he was 7 years old, when he first acquired the knack of chewing on coffee beans. Then there's Maggie, who ended up here by getting kicked out of the last cafe for occasionally, uncontrollably, bursting out into terrible renditions of already terrible Carol Channing songs, usually after she had had a few. And then there's Marty, who, like many, started out having an occasional single tall vanilla latte before work, until he one day found himself here, drinking what most of us refer to as Jumpin' Joe's espresso soup, till deep in the night. His story I know all too well, because believe it or not, up until the time I came to Seattle from a small town in Nevada, I had never even heard of espresso. As a matter of fact, at that time, I wouldn't have known whether a latte was an espresso with steamed milk or the Swedish translation for small boy. I had been in cafes before, but they usually served numbered breakfast specials. This, however, was entirely different. Here was this cafe, packed with people flying so high off espresso there was a sort of charge going through the room. It was haunting. The chanting of their voices over the eerie sounds of the giant espresso machine, cranking out more and more espresso for people who waited fervently like thirsty vampires around dusk. The only thing I had ever seen like it before was when I used to watch my Aunt Louise, who after her 4th cup of Folgers would always begin tap dancing violently on the shag carpet after dinner. My first instinct was, of course, to run. Instead, I ended up having my very first latte, and that's all it took. Before I knew it, this innocent cup of coffee had me dropping in once a week. Then, once a day. My singles, became doubles. My talls, shorts. I started buying from the pushers on the street. I found myself going to wild espresso parties, witnessing things I could never, ever explain. And finally, buying my very own espresso machine. At the time, I was still in the romance stage of drinking espresso, still convinced that it was nothing more than an innocent cup of joe, or so they say. But things eventually got worse and worse. I began to need one in the morning to get me going, another in the afternoon to keep me going, and always a nightcap to hold me over. I didn't sleep very much, if at all, and there were many times when I would find myself just waiting for morning so I could make myself another drink. I guess I should have noticed what was happening to me. I was falling to pieces, and with every passing day, my addiction to espresso was growing worse. The fun of the cafes had vanished, and drinking espresso was no longer out of want, but out of need. In less than 3 months, I had lost control of everything. And I was at the point where I no longer trusted myself, because I knew that even if I wanted to quit, the temptation would always be there. And I couldn't say no. Needless to say, something had to be done. Either that or I was bound to end up in some rehabilitation program for recovering espresso addicts, alongside some guy named Carl who traded in his child's bike for a double tall latte. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became what the problem was. I was living in a town that was corrupted by a bean, where there was really no place to hide from its influence. I knew the only chance I had was to get out while I still owned a piece of my body which didn't continuously shake. The further I drove, the better I knew my chances were that I would never need espresso again. That would all be behind me now, or so I thought. Damn! I often wonder whether or not I would have made it that night if I wouldn't have stopped at that gas station. Probably not. Considering I've tried to leave 2 other times since then. The last time getting as close as 10 miles from the border before I was pulled over by the police and given a latte while I waited for him to fill out my ticket. Every day, this drink becomes more and more popular. And I know it won't be long before it's not just Seattle, but everywhere that'll have people ending up in places just like this, wondering what happened, wondering how a cup of coffee called espresso could lead to this. Maybe they'll never be as bad as me. Maybe there'll be a quiet secretary in Des Moines who never comes back from that coffee break and is found later sitting in a tub of espresso listening to Lawrence Welk albums backwards while screaming at the top of her lungs, "Just call me Jerry." Yep. No one imagines themselves ending up like this. An espresso addict? Then again, most people never imagine moving to a city where you can order a latte while getting your shoes shined.